evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome. Welcome. I don't think that was for me. Welcome to a Wednesday special to the old theatre on the Green. 30 years ago, there were not less than 4 theatres on this very green. And if you'd been around Shepherd's Bush then, you could have paid the princely sum of 1 and 9pence in the old money next door at the Gaumont to see my special guest tonight. Start out on a career that so far spanned 30 years, 52 albums, 98 hit singles, and shows no sign of flagging. This man has spent more time on the charts than anyone except Elvis Presley. And the man still can fill any theatre in the country. Certainly filled this one tonight. And all our yesterdays are marked by songs like Living Doll and The Young Ones and Congratulations and Miss You Nights and Devil Woman. Now tonight, he's going to talk about himself, his career, his beliefs, and his life. Also, of course, do what he does best. Wired for sound, Cliff Richard! So this kind of retrospective, 30 years on.
I know.
Yeah.
It does seem a long time, but I personally don't know where it's all gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like 30 years.
Yeah. Back on Shepherd's Bush Green, this is where it all started for you, really, in a way, wasn't it?
Well, right next door, actually, at the Gaumont. Because
do you remember those shows?
Oh, yes. They used to have a... I mean, I don't know how long it went on for, but they had those talent competitions going very strong in those days. And they had a talent competition, but when we went in and said we'd like to appear, we said not as one of the, you know, the auditioning pieces. We will close the bill for you for free. Yeah. I think the word "for free"
that was the
got us in.
Was it? Yeah. When you think about 1 and 9 to get in and see you, that was almost free. But the crowd in here tonight have got in for nothing as well. So that the act hasn't changed much over 30 years. I mean, you still appear to be, for a man well stricken in years, you appear to be active.
Yes, I am. I reckon that as long as I can move, I will. Because, of course, it's when you can't do it anymore and you try to do it that it actually looks wrong.
Yeah.
So that, obviously, you know, I think that what I do on stage has changed quite drastically. When I look at old footage, I mean, I think I'm better at it now. I suppose after 30 years I've had it... Yeah, I'm not saying... Because it's like anything, you know, it's like a sport. You get better as time goes on. And whereas when I was 18, there was no prototype except for Elvis, and they lived over the sea, we had to discover for ourselves how to do everything. So I think it's actually, not just for me, but our whole industry, I think, is better in terms of performance than it used to be.
We were trying to think today of an equivalent in show business to you, somebody who has sustained a career as a pop star over 30 years, and nobody has. Really, perhaps if Elvis had lived,
yes,
certainly that he would have, and maybe some of the others. But nobody really has done that. And I mean, with all modesty, can you put your finger on anything that, I mean,
I really don't know. In the early days, I never thought ahead that far to say whether or not I'd be around in 30 years. It was difficult enough to answer questions about what you're going to do in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
Because our industry is notorious for, you know, the artists that come and go.
I was going to ask you, when the Beatles arrived, you were certainly at a peak then. You had started with about late 50s and starting in the 60s, very big star. Suddenly the Beatles arrive, become the biggest thing on the pop scene. It becomes all groups. Solo artists can't get arrested. Did you really think in about 62, 63, I'm sure you must have thought, well, that's me gone.
Well, I didn't think about gone, but I did start thinking, crumbs, you know, these bands are really good, and they were making really good records with great songs, and I thought, well, it's going to be tough. But you see, the interesting thing is that, for instance, my career didn't really change that much. It would appear to change to the public because the only people they wrote about in the press, the media, were guilty, really. Well, not guilty, it's up to them what they write about, but you'd think that there was no other band but the Beatles, plus a few other friends from Liverpool. Whereas the rest of us, like the Shadows and myself, were continuing. We did sell-out concerts. Our records were regularly in the top 20. And so nothing drastically changed. So after a couple of years of being in the competition with them, I felt a little easier. But I have to admit, it was not frightening, but definitely made you think, hey, this could be the end, because...
Well, it was the end for a number of solo artists who were almost as luminous as you at the time. Well, one thinks of Adam Faith and Marty Wilde and people like that.
Well, Adam's still going, of course.
Yes, but Adam's not going
in a different
as a pop
way.
singer.
Okay, yes.
And what was it? Did you plan it in any way, or did you just hung in there?
You just have to hang in. I think the main thing was that I was not going to compete directly. In the same way now, I'm not going to compete with Bros and people. How can I? These guys are really young. They look really young. They have a young following. But if you go in there and say, look, okay, there's room in the charts. If Bros are #1, there's another 19 spots in the top 20. If I can grab one of those spots, I'm up there with them. And in history, all they'll see is my name with theirs. Last year, I was really thrilled when Always Guaranteed came out. I had in Europe particularly, I looked through Europe and Britain. I had no such luck in America. But everywhere else in the world, there I was with Michael Jackson in the top 5, Madonna, George Michael, Pet Shop Boys, and myself. And I thought, crumbs, you know, I'm the odd man out. No.
I have to say, tonight you're leaning against an open door here.
I am indeed. I mean, audiences have always been very kind to me, but I do know that tonight it's kind of special because, you know, I don't really have an official fan club as such. But having said that, I have to say that there are possibly more than 30 secretaries of clubs and meeting houses who, I think, maybe a historical event, they're all sitting together somewhere up there. So,
now, you were talking about people like Bros, and the pop business has changed radically since you started.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems to me that, with the best will in the world, groups come and go with far greater frequency than they used to. I mean, one remembers Curiosity Killed the Cat last year, Depeche Mode, Spandau. I'm not saying they're finished, but they certainly they came to the top in a blaze of glory.
So, well, the peak comes very quick, and I think it's possibly to do with the fact that it's relatively easy to get into a studio now. When I think back to the days when I was 18, we kind of heard of EMI and Decca, and that they had studios somewhere in London. Nowadays, you know, I get sent demo tapes that are made in people's bedrooms, and they could almost pass as masters.
Yes,
I mean, it's incredible. So the chances of making a record is great, but no one's out there. Where are the companies that are actually doing what they did with people like myself? People like the late Norrie Paramore, George Martin. They nurtured us. They were very concerned about what we recorded, how we performed it. Could they come and help us do it live? And so therefore, a whole group of people like myself were helped to have a career.
You think it's much more exploitation now?
I think so, to a certain extent. I mean, you can't blame the management or companies for selling records. That's their job, to sell records. A lot of it's to do with the attitude of artists, too. I don't know whether... You see, there are a number of artists now who make really fantastic records. If they wanted to, it's wide open to them. Someone like myself does 30 years, only sets a precedent and says, well, if he can do it, so can anybody else, really. It's wide open. Rock and roll is no longer a here today, gone tomorrow bag.
And they do say, of course, that with increasing technology and all the rest in recording studios, that it's not necessary for artists to be able to play instruments or do anything, or even sing anymore.
No, well, yeah, that's true to an extent, although there isn't a machine that can play anything by itself. So any artist that goes in with machinery has to tell the machine what to play. But there is a difference between playing that on a record where you've got a month to make one track, perhaps only. That's all you need to do. On stage, you have to do it in 3.5 minutes, and you've got to be fairly proficient. I've got a band that is really wonderful, and if I didn't have them, I don't know what I'd do on stage.
You've got to do the guitar here.
I
mean, were you always... do you remember your first record? Was that Move It?
I do.
The B side of your first record.
In fact, I'm always very proud of the fact that because I'm not a musician as such, I'm not hampered by the problems of apparently 2/4 bars in the middle of a riff.
Aren't you?
No, so that I was... No, you're not either, are you?
No,
I can tell.
no, I'm not.
But you see,
I'm starting to worry now.
A lot of people found it very hard to play the intro of Move It.
Yeah.
And I find it really easy.
Oh.
Shall I continue a bit?
Yeah.
Come on, pretty baby, let's move it and groove it. Shake, baby, shake, but honey, please don't lose it. This rhythm that gets into your heart and soul. Well, let me tell you, people, it's called rock and roll.
Hey. Is there any...
I have to tell you, apart from... Thank you. The hardest part of that was... The rest of it that I sang, all was on the same chord. Rock and roll did wonders for those of us who weren't really musicians, although I have to say it's changed drastically now, of course.
Is there any other riff that you like? Any one that you've learned specially?
Well, I always wanted to have this as a doorbell chime. And then there was, this turned out to be prophetic, of course. When I was young, my father said, son, I've got something to say. And what he told me I'll never forget until my dying day. He said, son, you are a bachelor boy, and that's the way to stay. Happy to be a bachelor boy until my dying day. Very good. Good
You've always been, whether it's you or your management, you've always been very clever about your choice of material. Is there any song that you really would love to have recorded and you never did?
Oh, you know, if you gave me a week to think about that, I could think of a dozen. I'd love to have had a go at The Lady in Red.
Yeah.
In fact, anything that's been number one in the last 20 years.
Don't be selfish. Don't be selfish. You've had about 10. We were just totting up and saying you've had 10 number ones, Varicose in the 51 in the top 10, 97 in the top 20.
You're beginning to sound like Tim Rice. He knows all these things.
Whatever happened to him?
I don't know.
Your latest, if it becomes a hit, and why not, will be your 99th single.
Single, yes.
And possibly your 99th hit.
Well...
Mistletoe and wine aimed directly at the Easter market. Now, I'm just thinking
there's no excuses for it. I love doing those kind of songs.
Well, yes, it's full of kids. I'm just wondering about yourself. Christmas is a time for families, obviously. Do you regret not having a family? I know you have your family, but not having children of your own, not having a wife.
No, not really. I mean, I can't say I regret it, because if that would have suggested that maybe I had been in love enough to get married and turned it down. I mean, it hasn't happened for me, so therefore I have no regrets in that area. Apart from which, it's really good the way it is, because when all the kids come over, it's fantastic, but I have a fabulous time, and then they all go home.
You sound like, that's what grandparents tend to say. Now, be very careful. I mean, I'm only a couple of years older than you. I haven't worn as well. But, I mean, I've got my kids, and in my declining years, they, I hope, will keep me in the comfort to which I've become accustomed. I mean, does that not strike you? You went departing, leaving behind your footprints in the sands of time and having...
Not really, no. It's funny, I guess some people are just built the way I'm built so that I can deal with it, because I have no great feeling about leaving anything behind, because the chances are that your children won't end up as interviewers. Or rock singers or whatever. You know, I mean, they may do, and I suppose most fathers would like to think that someone's going to follow on, and in a way that kind of pressure.
No, I didn't mean follow on, but I mean look after you in your decay.
Oh, look after. Oh,
yes,
I see.
You know.
No, well, I'll just pay for a Dolly Bird to come and.
Now, this is the side to your character.
I've been saving for 30 years, Terry.
Now, of course, I know that your belief is a great strength, and has been the great strength of your life. In the mid-60s, you toyed with the idea of giving up your career and devoting yourself to religion.
Yes, it was a brief time, really, because I had just become a Christian. And the thing is that when you become a Christian, for me anyway, it was the most exciting step in my life that I'd ever taken. And so therefore, I felt really hyper for it. I was really hyped up. And of course, there is a pressure within the Christian world to get thee out of what you do. It's less now than it was, but in those days it was pretty strong, that you can't be in show business and be a Christian. So I thought, well, no, okay, I can't be in show business. So I thought I would leave, and I even went so far as to taking an O-level in religious knowledge, because I thought, well, I'll become a teacher. And then I thought, well, can I teach? Can I learn myself? So I took this exam, and I got my O-level, and then I went to a teacher's training college and spoke to the head, the principal, and I said, I've got no qualifications other than I really would like to teach one day. He said, well, you know, that's the best qualification. He said, because half the people in our college don't want to teach. They're just filling in time. So by the time I'd taken all these steps, of course, doors were opening wider and wider for me as a Christian within the rock and roll world. I had never dreamt that I could be as active in terms of my faith as I have been able to be, i.e. doing gospel concerts and speaking in churches and schools, making gospel records, doing Christian work on television, not just here but around the world.
Do people say to you, well, you're a Christian and a committed Christian, how do you reconcile that with the Christian message of giving up all your goods and following Christ?
There isn't any message that says that. Jesus actually did say it to one man, and he actually hinted that it was more difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. You know that story about the eye of an eagle? Yeah. What he didn't say, what would have been as far as I'm concerned, if he had said it is impossible for people who are above a certain wage earning to get into heaven, then I would make sure that I would rather be skint and in heaven than rich and in hell. So it's a simple choice for me. Theologically, it's totally up the spout. It's just not true. What it does say, though, is that to whom much is given, much is expected in return. And again, that's why I think, you know, when the early Christians and way back in the Old Testament too, when people gave their tithe, the 10% or whatever it was, it meant that if you only earned so much, you still only gave a small percentage. It was much less than the rich man gave. And so I feel that God has given me a great deal, and I give back a lot. I mean, I began my charity trust because I wanted to cream off from my earnings myself. I tithe my time. I mean, I don't have to go around telling people, here are the books, this is what I do, but it's what I do. And so therefore I'm making use of my position in life, you know, and I feel it's the right thing. If it was the wrong thing, you think God would have not shut the doors before now? He's too clever to allow someone like me to fake it all, and you know what I mean? It just couldn't stand it.
He does work in mysterious ways, mind you. The other thing I wanted to ask, and since we are running out of time, the one thing that you've had your hits in the States, but has it been a source of regret to you that you never really cracked the States as a personality?
Yes, now their regret can be used, because there I've had the taste of it, you know. There was a time some years back when I thought to myself, well, they just don't like what I do. Now sometimes you've got to face life and say, that's it folks, Americans don't like the Cliff Richard type of rock and roll. But I've had 9 top 30 hit singles. Whenever the record starts, I flash over there, do all the dreadful, they have got some dreadful TV shows and dreadful radio stations, and you go there and you do it all, and the record gets in the charts, which means that somebody out there does like what I do. But you cannot consider yourself successful there unless you've had an album that's big, because they have an identity crisis. You know, I could quote any of my songs to people out there, they would know the songs and they wouldn't know my name at all. Yeah. The strange thing is, having had 9, if I put Mistletoe and Wine, for instance, onto a compilation album of my hits in America, I could genuinely have a top 30 hit album and everyone will say, who's he? Because they just don't know me at all. That's why, in fact, if I can make it in America, they'll think I'm a newcomer. And I'll go out there with all this flash gear and they'll go, what? So, I mean, with a bit of luck, if I make it before I'm 50, time's running out, folks.
The one thing we can be sure of is that you're certainly never going to look it. And I mean, I'm looking forward to the next 30. Will you come back here? Maybe come back in 50 years' time and you won't have changed. But I shall be extremely doddery if I'm even spared.
I'm not sure EMI could stand it, you know. They're already putting out a double album. They're going to have a quadruple album.
You're going to finish with some music for us?
Yes, if that's all right.
What would you like?
Well, one of my favourite songs from the Always Guaranteed album, which, interestingly enough, although after 30 years I released an album, it's the best-selling album I ever had here. I thought I'd peaked, you know, like 100 years ago. So, Some People was one of my favourite tracks.
ladies and gentlemen, and Uncle Cliff, I know you don't know about this, but this is a rather special award made by AMI. If you just lift that up, we can... Don't, for heaven's sake, touch that, because it's solid gold. It's a solid gold record.
You mean real...
We've heard of gold records. That's why I'm wearing the gloves. Don't touch it with your fingers. It
I
leaves
thought you
a
got
mark.
something wrong.
It's a solid...
Picked up something on the way. You mean that's like an English...
Don't put your finger on it. It's gold, man, gold. And it's all your hits on a solid gold record. That's what they think of you.
That's too heavy.
I'm going to give it a glove. Now look, I'm going to... Wonderful. You got the gloves.
Okay, mate.
Congratulations. Thank you. Now, I must say, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure to mark one of the most remarkable careers in the history of show business with this tribute. And thank you, Cliff. We'll see you in 2018.
That's a deal.
Yeah. And I hope to see the rest of you before that on Friday, when, unless you've been up the Hindu Kush for the last week, you'll know we'll be bringing you one of the greatest nights of the television year, the Children in Need appeal. Last year we raised £14 million. None of it from any conglomerate, multinational, nor corporation. Every last penny came from you. So I'll see you on Friday at 7 with me, Begging Bowl. Good night.